This story was sent to me by the granddaughter of a man who served in the United States Navy. She found his account written in a notebook after he passed away in 2019. She asked me to share it because she said her grandfather spent the last 40 years of his life trying to get someone to believe him, and nobody ever did. For the sake of his privacy, we will call him Daniel. What you are about to hear is his account, in his own words, of something that happened in Antarctica in the winter of 1947. Operation Highjump was real. You can look it up. In December of 1946, the United States Navy sent 4,700 men, 13 ships, and 33 aircraft to Antarctica, the largest expedition the continent had ever seen. The official mission was mapping and scientific research. It was scheduled to last 8 months. It came home in 4. Nobody has ever fully explained why. This is what Daniel says happened. I was 23 years old when I shipped out for Antarctica. I had joined the Navy at the tail end of the war and missed most of the fighting. And if I am being honest, a part of me was disappointed about that. I wanted to be part of something. I wanted a story I could tell. I got one. I just spent the rest of my life wishing I hadn't. I was not a nervous man. I was not someone who spooked easily or saw things that were not there. I grew up on a farm in Nebraska. I had sat with dying animals. I had been alone in the dark more nights than I could count. And I had never once in my life been afraid of the quiet. I am telling you that so you understand what kind of man I was before Antarctica. And so you understand what kind of man I was after. My assignment was communications support at a forward position the men called Station Echo. It was a small outpost, about 60 miles inland from the coast, set up to relay radio signals between the survey teams in the deep field and the main base back on the ice shelf. There were 9 of us stationed there, a small crew, a generator, a radio tower, 2 prefabricated huts, and more empty white nothing around us than I have words to describe. If you have never been to Antarctica, I cannot fully explain the silence. It is not like the quiet of a forest, where there are still small sounds underneath if you listen. It is a complete absence. The cold is so total that even sound seems to freeze. You can hear your own heartbeat. You can hear the blood moving in your ears. That silence is the first thing that should have warned me. On the farm, silence meant peace. Out here, I would learn. Silence meant something was listening back. 2 weeks into our posting, the silence started to have something in it. It started on the overnight radio watch. In Antarctica in the summer, the sun never sets, but we still kept to a clock, and the overnight shift was the loneliest. Everyone else asleep, just you and the radio equipment and the hum of the generator. The first night I heard it, I thought it was the equipment, a sound very low coming through the radio. Not a voice, not static, a slow, rhythmic pulse, like something large breathing, far away, at the very bottom of what the equipment could pick up. I checked the frequency. It was not a frequency we used. It was not a frequency anyone used. It sat down at the very edge of the dial, in a part of the band that should have had nothing on it at all. I logged it as equipment interference, and I did not think much more about it, until the next night, when it was a little louder. And the night after that, when I realized it was not coming from the radio. I had switched the radio off completely, powered it all the way down to check a connection, and I could still hear it, faint, underneath the generator hum, underneath the silence. That same slow rhythmic pulse coming up, it seemed, through the floor, through the ice, from somewhere below us. I sat very still in that hut for a long time, telling myself it was the generator, telling myself it was the wind, telling myself it was my own blood in my ears. It was none of those things. And somewhere underneath the part of my brain that was making excuses, the older part, the animal part, already knew that. About 3 weeks in, a survey team came through Station Echo on their way back from the deep field. There were 4 of them, and they were not right. They were not injured. They were not sick, as far as our corpsman could tell. Their vitals were normal. They ate. They answered questions. But they were quiet in a way that I had never seen men be quiet. They had been out near a grid reference deep in the interior, running ice-penetrating soundings, mapping what lay beneath the glacier. Standard work. They had been gone 6 weeks. The team leader was a man named Coyle. I sat across from him in the mess hut while he ate, and I tried to make conversation, asking what it was like out there. He looked at me for a long moment before he answered, and then he said something I have never forgotten. He said, "Do you hear it here too?" I did not answer him. I did not have to. He saw it on my face. He nodded slowly, went back to his food, and said one more thing, almost to himself. "It is bigger than they think. The maps are wrong. It is all one thing down there." I asked him what he meant. He did not answer. None of them answered anything after that. The next morning they continued on toward the coast, and I never saw any of them again. But I thought about what Coyle said every single night for the rest of my life. It is all one thing down there. After the survey team left, I did something I was not supposed to do. I went into the equipment hut and pulled the soundings data the team had left behind for relay to the main base. The soundings were a map of what lay beneath the ice. The sonar pulses went down through the glacier, hit the bedrock, and bounced back, and the timing of the return told you the shape of what was down there. I found the readings from the grid reference where Coyle's team had been working, and I sat there in that cold hut, and I felt something in my stomach drop away, because the readings did not show bedrock. Whatever the sonar had hit down there, hundreds of feet below the ice, it was not the shape of rock. Rock is irregular. Rock is random. This was not random. There was a structure to it, a symmetry. The return signal showed something with edges, something that repeated, something that, the deeper the soundings went, got larger, not smaller, spreading out beneath the ice in every direction the team had measured. It is all one thing down there. I understood then what Coyle had meant. In 6 weeks of soundings across miles of ice, they had not found the edge of whatever it was, and it was directly beneath us. The readings from under Station Echo matched. We were sitting on top of it. That was the night the pulse got loud enough that the other men started to hear it too. I was not the only one anymore. It started with the youngest man at the station, a kid named Pierce, who came to me white-faced after his overnight watch and asked me if the station was built over anything, if there was machinery underneath. I told him there wasn't. He did not believe me. He was right not to. Within a few days, all 9 of us were hearing it, and the sound was no longer steady. It had developed a pattern, a sequence, and once you noticed the pattern, you could not stop noticing it. It got into your head. You found yourself tapping it without realizing. Pierce started humming it in his sleep. I caught myself doing it while I worked, this low pattern over and over, and I did not remember starting. It was learning us. Every night the sound was a little more shaped, a little more deliberate, a little more like it was reaching up through the ice and feeling around to see what we were. And then one morning, Pierce was gone. His bunk was empty. His cold weather gear was still hanging by the door. All of it. His coat, his boots, his gloves. The temperature outside was 40 degrees below zero. We searched. 8 men spread out across the ice with the sun hanging low and white over everything, calling his name into a silence that swallowed our voices. We found his tracks. They led away from the station, out into the open ice, heading inland, toward the deep field, toward the grid reference where Coyle's team had been. And here is the part I have never been able to explain. The tracks were barefoot, 40 below zero, and Pierce had walked out with no coat, no boots, nothing, and left a trail of bare footprints in the snow, heading away from us in a perfectly straight line. There is a protocol for a missing man. We all knew it by heart. Secure the area. Radio command. Wait for authorization before pursuit. Do not break formation. We broke every line of it. 8 men walked off that station into open ice with no authorization, no radio call, no plan, because some part of each of us already understood that this was not a situation any protocol had ever been written for. The training that had kept us alive our whole careers had nothing to say about the thing at the end of those tracks. That should have frightened me more than it did. We followed them for almost a mile, and then they stopped, mid-stride. One moment, there was a man walking across the ice, and the next moment, there was nothing. No more prints, no disturbance, as if the ice had simply opened and taken him and closed again, smooth and white and silent, as if he had never been there at all. We stood at the end of those tracks, the 8 of us, and nobody said a word, because down beneath our feet, very faint, the pulse was still going, and it had gotten a little faster. Almost, I thought, like something that was pleased. We radioed the main base that afternoon and reported Pierce as lost to environmental conditions. A man had wandered out in a confused state and died of exposure. That is what we told them. We did not tell them about the tracks. We did not tell them about the sound. We did not tell them about the readings showing something beneath the ice that had edges and symmetry and no end. We had already understood, without ever discussing it, that there are some things you cannot report. The men in the warm offices back home would only see one thing in it. A sailor who came back from the ice talking about a thing underneath the world. So we said nothing. And 4 days later, when the order came down that Operation Highjump was being recalled, that the entire expedition was packing up and going home 4 months ahead of schedule with no explanation given to any of us, I did not ask why. I think I already knew why. I think somewhere up the chain, in a room I would never see, someone had read the soundings too. The last night at Station Echo, I took the final overnight radio watch. I sat in that hut alone, with the equipment powered down and packed for transport, with nothing to do but wait for morning and the transport that would take us off the ice forever. And the sound was louder than it had ever been. But it was not just sound anymore. I could feel it in my teeth, a vibration that made my fillings ache. The air in that hut had changed. It tasted of copper and something older, like turned earth, like the inside of a grave opened after a long winter. The cold was different too. Not the clean, dry cold of Antarctica I had grown used to. This cold felt wet. It felt like breath. It moved against the back of my neck in slow, deliberate passes, warm and damp where everything else was frozen, and I understood with a certainty that went past reason that something was exhaling against my skin. It was all around me. That slow, shaped, deliberate pulse, the one Pierce had hummed in his sleep before he walked barefoot into nothing. It filled the entire hut, came from the walls, the ceiling, the air itself. and I sat in the middle of it, and I could not move. And then, very clearly, in the pattern of that pulse, I understood that it was not a sound at all. It was a question. It had been asking the same question for weeks, patiently, the way you might tap on the glass of an aquarium to see if the thing inside reacts. And on that last night, I finally understood what the question was. It was asking if we were coming down. I did not answer. I sat absolutely still, the way you go still when something is in the room with you in the dark, and I waited, and I did not answer it, and somewhere in the smallest hours of that endless white night, the pulse slowed, and softened, and stopped. The transport came at dawn. We loaded on without speaking. As we lifted off the ice and station echo shrank away below us to a black dot in all that white, I looked down once, and I have regretted looking ever since, because the snow around the station, the smooth, unbroken snow that had been there all night, was marked now, a pattern pressed into it, vast, far larger than the station, far larger than anything that could have made it in a single night, a shape with edges and symmetry that I recognized immediately because I had seen it before. I had seen it in the soundings. The thing under the ice had pushed itself up against the bottom of the world to see us leave. Daniel came home in 1947. He served 2 more years, requested a transfer to shore duty, and was never sent near cold weather again. He married, had children, worked as a radio repairman, and by every account lived an ordinary and quiet life. His granddaughter said he kept one thing his entire life that nobody in the family understood. He could not sleep in silence. Every night, for the rest of his life, he slept with a radio on, tuned to static, the volume low. When anyone asked him why, he gave the same answer every time. He said the silence let it in. He said as long as there was a sound in the room, a sound he had chosen, a sound he controlled, then he could not hear the other one, the slow one, the one that was still somewhere, very far away and very far down, asking its question and waiting, with all the patience in the world, for an answer. His granddaughter found his notebook after he died. The last page was not part of the story. It was a single line, written in an old man's shaking hand, dated only a few weeks before he passed. It read, "It is still asking. I can hear it again. I think it finally knows I am almost out of sound." Operation Highjump came home 4 months early in 1947. The Navy has never fully explained why. Daniel believed he knew, and now, so do you.